A very warm namaskar to all. Today we are going to have a session on important topic of strength of material, that is column, or more specifically the struts. This is going to be an introductory session. So what are the basic prerequisites which are essential for the better understanding of the topic? We are going to discuss them today, and these are the contents we are going to cover today. And failure criterion, and so these are the contents we are going to cover today uh, for the better understanding of the your topic, that is the columns. So in the introduction, it is very important to understand what is a column is. So column basically is a structural member that is designed to carry the load along the principal axis, and in case of the column, the principal axis is your longitudinal axis. So usually they are being compared with the beams, which are also a structural member which are designed to carry the load perpendicular to the principal axis. Again, the principal axis is the longitudinal axis, and they are loaded along their length in the transverse direction, that is the direction perpendicular to the your principal axis, which is the longitudinal axis. In that case, we will take an example. So actually the columns and beams are distinguished basically the way they are oriented themselves, and the way the load is being oriented applied to them with respect to the longitudinal axis or the principal axis. So let us take an example of a column. Say the ends are fixed. So, so this is the example of a column. Ends are fixed. If it is loaded, if this structural member is loaded along this principal axis, which is the longitudinal axis, then such a member is called as column. And it may happen that say example is, you might have find in the traditional electricity poles where the tension strings are provided in order to uphold the columns in the vertical directions. So because of this tension your string, some component of the load may act in the direction perpendicular to the longitudinal direction, but the principally it is being designed to carry the load in the longitudinal direction. This is only the component because of the support in order to uphold it in the vertical direction. So it may happen in case of the column that some components may act in the transverse direction, that is the direction perpendicular to the longitudinal direction, but the principal function of such a component is to carry the load in the longitudinal direction. So they are known as the columns, and they are usually oriented in the vertical direction, and they are usually subjected to the compression. Another is similar component is the beam, and the beams are basically oriented in the horizontal direction, and they are designed to carry the load along their length in the in the transverse direction, that is the direction perpendicular to the principal direction, and the principal direction here is also the longitudinal direction. So when they carry the load in the transverse direction, P1, P2, P3, and it may happen that some components, say the load is acting at an angle, say P4 load is acting at an angle, so it will have the component along the length also. So reaction will be there, say in this direction. So some component may act along the length also. So, but the principle it is being designed to carry the load in the transverse direction, that is the direction perpendicular to the longitudinal direction, hence they are known called as beams. So this is an example of a beam, and this is the example of a column. Another is, so this is, we have defined the your column and the beam, and the column and the beam are differentiated the way they are oriented and the way they are going to carry the load with respect to the principal axis. Another topic we are going to cover today is the types and the classification. So columns are being classified first on the basis of slenderness ratio, which will be abbreviated as SR, that is slenderness ratio. So first it is important to define the slenderness ratio. Generally the slenderness ratio is defined as the ratio of length to the cross sectional area, where L is the length and A is the cross sectional area. So slenderness ratio, as the name indicates, slenderness ratio, that how slender the component is, how thin it is. So they are being decided by the ratio of the two parameters, that is the length and the cross sectional area. If something is having a substantial length, it doesn't mean it is thin. Even if something is having the substantial area, it doesn't mean it is thick. So we need to identify the two parameters which classify something as long and thin, or something as short and thick. So those two parameters which classify whether your column is going to be a thick column or a short column, or a thin column or a long column. So these are the two parameters, that is the relative size of the length with respect to the cross sectional area is going to be a parameter which is called generally as the slenderness ratio, which are going to categorize the columns as, the types are going to be short, thick column, or which is simply called as column also. Means instead of calling it short and thick, they are simply called as the column. Second category is long, thin columns, which are also called as the struts. So based upon this ratio, that in comparison to the cross sectional area, if the length is comparatively large, then it is going to be called as a thin, and the long means the length in comparison to the cross sectional area is large, then such a column is going to be categorized as long and thin. And if the reverse happen, that with comparison to the length the cross sectional area is large, then it is going to be called as short and the thick. They may be defined with respect to the other values also, like if with respect to the length the cross sectional area is large, or with respect to the cross sectional area length is small, then they are going to be categorized as short and the thick. So this is the general definition of the slenderness ratio. But in case of your columns, because the columns are also subjected to the indirect load, that is the bending moment. See, this is an example of a column. When the load is being applied, it buckles or crumble, means it is subjected to the additional indirect load because of this direct loading. That indirect load is the bending moment. So there is also a resistance to the bending moment that has to be taken into account, because what we are categorizing here, the types are short and the thick, which are having a lesser tendency for the bending movement, that is, they are having a greater resistance for the bending movement, and long and thin, they are going to have a greater tendency for the bending movement in comparison to the shorter one. So what is the point here? The cross sectional area is the area which provided the resistance for the direct load, as well as the distribution of the area about the certain axis also provided the resistance to the bending. So we need a parameter over here in case of the columns. In a general definition, your slenderness ratio is basically the ratio of length by the area. So they are sufficient to categorize something as short and thick or long and thin. But as I have already told, that the long and thin components, they are also susceptible to the bending moment also. So we need the another parameter also, which have resistance for the bending, so that we are able to categorize them. If the resistance to the bending is going to be high, they are going to be called as short and the thick, because short and thick components, they are going to have more resistance for the bending in comparison to the long and the thin. So that parameter which incorporate these two resistances, one resistance is for the direct loading, another resistance is for the indirect loading, and in case of beams and the columns, indirect load, because of the direct load, is the bending moment. So that parameter is called as the moment of inertia, or not moment of inertia, specifically it is the second moment of the area. So I, which is the second moment of the area, AK square, where K is the radius of gyration, where K is equal to radius of gyration, which is a hypothetical radius at which the entire area is assumed to be concentrated, that is going to induce the same moment of inertia as the actual component is inducing. That is known as a radius of gyration. So in order to understand the radius of gyration, we need to consider the two situation. One is the actual situation. Say this beam's cross section is rectangular, and this is the cross section, and say it has the tendency of rotation about, say, this axis, and this axis is, say, x axis. Then this is the actual situation, and the moment of inertia in this case we are able to find out from a formula. Say it's this dimension is, say, breadth, and this dimension is, say, the depth. Then we know that moment of inertia about the I axis is equal to b d cube upon 12. This is the moment of inertia, and the area of this cross section is, say, A1, which is equal to B into D. Now we are in order to define the radius of gyration, which is a hypothetical radius at which the entire area is going to be concentrated. The area is going to be the same, moment of inertia is going to be the same, means we are going to compare it with or represent it with the hypothetical area, which is going to be dynamically equivalent. This is the actual system, and dynamically equivalent system I am going to draw, which is going to have the same moment about the same axis. Say axis is the x-axis, and the area is going to be the same, that is A2 in this second system. That is the models we are going to consider is going to be the A1, which is equal to B into D. But the area is going to be taken in such a way that it is going to be concentrated all the area is going to be concentrated at the same point. So it is going to be a strip whose length is going to be adjusted such that the area A2 is going to be equal to A1, means length is going to be increased and thickness is going to be reduced, and reduction of the thickness is going to ensure that the entire area of all the elements are going to be concentrated at the same distance away from the x-axis, and this distance is called as the radius of gyration. In this case, because the distance is being measured, अगर axis को हम coordinate system ले, say this is your x-axis, this one is your y-axis. Since the distance is being measured along the y-axis, this is known as your ky. So radius of gyration. So and because the two systems are the equivalent, the areas are the equal. A1 is equal to A2. Only the difference is the area is going to be concentrated at the same distance away from the axis of the rotation, and that's why we have considered a long strip whose thickness is going to be very small, so that the entire area is going to be concentrated at the same distance away from the axis of rotation. And since the two systems are dynamically equivalent, then the moment of inertia over here, that is Ixx, is going to be equal to I say 2, which is going to be equal to AK square. So from here we are able to identify the value of K, which is in this case is Ky, which will be equal to under root of Ixx divided by your cross sectional area. So this is how we are able to find out the value of Ky, which is the radius of gyration, which is a hypothetical concept. That is the radius at which the entire area is assumed to be concentrated, so that the two systems, the hypothetical system and the actual system, have the same moment of inertia. So what is the physical significance of the second moment of the area is that it provides the resistance to the bending. And whereas the physical significance of the cross-sectional area, it provides the resistance to the direct loading. So here the direct loading is the load P, which is being provided, and the type of the stresses is going to it is going to induce, they are going to be your direct stresses, which is going to be either compressive in nature or the tensile in nature, the way the load is being applied. And in case of the beam, they are going to be the shear stresses, because the load is acting parallel to the resisting area. So resisting area is the size of the area which provides the resistance for the direct loading, and indirect effect of this load is the bending moment, as I have already told. And the resistance to the bending is being provided by the moment of inertia, and the moment of inertia characterizes how readily the area is being distributed away from the axis of the rotation. If from the axis of the rotation area is going to be distributed more, then the resistance to the bending is going to be comparatively more. And why we are considering these two resistances in case of the column, that is in case of the column, here the cylinderness ratio is being categorized as, or the classified as, specifically for the beams and the column, cylinderness ratio is being defined as the ratio of L by K, because this parameter K actually incorporates the two things, that is the moment of inertia that provides the resistance to the bending, and as well as it provides, also incorporates the cross sectional area that provides the resistance to the direct loading. And these two parameters are important because they classify whether something is going to be short and thick, and whether something is going to be long and thin. Because if something is going to have greater resistance for the bending and the greater resistance for the direct loading, they are going to be classified as short and thick. So thick means they are going to have the greater cross-sectional area, means the magnitude of the cross-sectional area is going to be very high, and short, that is the bending tendency of the column is going to be comparatively low, because the distribution of the area about the axis of the rotation is very large, and hence the resistance for the bending is large. But in case of long end thing, the your cross sectional area in comparison to the short and the thick is going to be large, hence the resistance for the direct loading is comparatively going to be less, and the resistance for the your bending moment is also comparatively is going to be less. However, the resistance for the bending moment depend upon the distribution of the load away from the cross sectional area. So the point here is we have classified the types of the beam based upon the slenderness ratio. General definition was L by A, but specifically for the beams and the columns, the slenderness ratio is being categorized as classified as L by K. The reason is I have already told. Another classification is the classification based upon another classification is classification based upon and conditions of columns, and specifically we are talking about the struts because we are considering the bending also. So the types are going to, under this category the types are going to be, first one is both the ends are pinned. So pinned means pinned is basically a revolutory joint, means the two components which are pinned, they are going to have a free rotary motion with respect to each other. There is going to be no resistance for the rotary motion. So in case of a pin joint, we need to remember that if the end is pinned, so they are not going to have any resistance for the rotation, hence the bending moment or the moment at this point is going to be equal to 0. And since the but this joint, say this is the member 2 and this is the member 1, which is pin joint. Say this is member 1 and member 2 are the pin jointed over here. Resistance for the moment is going to be 0, but the joint as a whole can move in the downward and the upward direction depending upon the direction of the load. So the important point was the bending moment or the resisting moment. Basically the resisting moment at the joint is 0 because the pin joint is designed for the rotation with respect to each other. So when both the ends are pinned, that is the one category, and another is when uh, one end is fixed and other free. One more important thing which we need to remember here, if something is fixed, if one end is fixed, then we are going to have a fixing moment over here, because this joint, say this is the component 1, this is the component 2, see the component 1 and component 2 do not have the relative motion, and if the load is being applied over here, if the load is being applied over, then it is going to induce a resisting moment. So resisting moment in case of a fixed beam is always going to be there. That has to be considered as a reaction for the direct loading. So moment is not going to be 0 for the, however it depends upon the type of the load. If there is not going to be any load, obviously the moment is not going to be there and it will be equal to 0. But resistance is going to be there for the moment, the way the joint are being, because the joint is rigid. And second important thing is, we know that at this point the deflection, we are going to define later on, deflection is going to be 0. Okay, we will discuss it later on when we are going to define the deflection. See what is going to be the slope over here or not. So this is the condition when the one end is fixed and the other end is free. Another classification is both the ends fixed, and next classification is one end fixed, and other pinned. So these are the four types of the columns, and specifically these are the studs, because we are considering the combined load, that is the your bending, and its indirect load, that is the bending. Combined effect of the direct loading and the bending. Bending is the consequence of your direct loading. So these are the four types of the columns, or specifically the studs, we are going to discuss in order to identify the limiting value of the stress or the limiting value of the load before the failure. So another topic which we are going to cover is that is the failure criteria. For studs in specific or columns in general. Okay, before that, there is one important thing is also there, that we need to identify. Actually, you see, there are two principal axes over here. One is the longitude, one is this axis, another axis in case of this area is y axis. So it is also important that we need to identify about which it is going to bend, whether it is going to bend, rotate about the your x axis, whether it is going to rotate about your y axis. So as I have already told you, that it depends upon the means moment of inertia provide the resistance for the bending. So about which axis the moment of inertia is going to be the greater, that is going to provide the greater resistance in comparative to the other axis about which the moment of inertia is lesser. So the criteria about which it is going to rotate depend upon about which axis the moment of inertia is comparatively less. So in this case, we are choosing that as can be shown over here. You are able to physically identify for the simple cases, otherwise you have to calculate for the complicated cases. So simple case, you are able to identify that when we are considering the moment about the x-axis, the area is comparatively closer about this axis, hence the moment of inertia about the x-axis is seems to be lesser than the moment of inertia about the y-axis, because the distribution of the same area about the y-axis is comparatively larger. So let us calculate in this case, because b is greater than d, then you know that Ixx is equal to, which I have already calculated, this is equal to bd cube upon 12, and Iyy is equal to db cube upon 12. So if we take the ratio Iyy upon say Ixx, then if this ratio is greater than 1, then obviously the moment of inertia about Iyy is greater than Ixx. So this is equal to db cube upon bd cube, which will be equal to b square upon your d square. And because we have chosen b is greater than d, then this ratio is obviously greater than 1. Hence Iyy is greater than Ixx. So it means this, in this case, when this cross section is going to be subjected to the bending, then it will have rotation about this axis. अगर इसको मैं 3 डायमेंशन में दिखाने की कोशिश करूं, so if it is subjected to this type of load, so it will be subjected, means this is say the axis which we have considered x axis, and another is this is your y axis, and this dimension I have chosen as b, and this dimension is say d. So in this case it is going to bend about your x axis, means it is going to bend like this. That is this cross section area, this area is going to rotate about your x-axis. It is going to have a rotational tendency with respect to the initial condition about the x-axis. So it depends about which axis the moment of inertia is greater, and the physical significance of the moment of inertia is how readily the area is being distributed about the axis of the rotation. If it is farther away from the axis of the rotation, more resistance it is going to provide for the bending. If it is closer to the area of the rotation, then it is going to provide lesser resistance, and about that axis it is going to bend. So this is the reason I am going to take an example of a scale. So this is a scale. Whenever we provide a load over here about its longitudinal axis, means when we are considering it as a column, then you see that it is always going to bend about the axis. Say we are considering the three axes. One axis is along the longitudinal axis. Say this is the z direction, and one along its breadth. Say this is the breadth. Say this is your x direction, and along the thickness perpendicular to the both in this direction, that is your say another third direction, that is your y. So in this case it is going to rotate about the your x-axis. It is going to rotate about the x-axis, that is the axis which is parallel to the width, because along the width about this axis the your area is closely distributed is in comparison to the another axis, that is your y-axis. It never going to rotate about this direction whenever the load is being provided along the longitudinal direction. So this is the reason that in area is the same in both the cases. Whenever we are going to consider the moment of inertia about y-axis, the area is the same. If we are considering this area, the moment of the area about same area about the x-axis, obviously the area is the same. Only the difference is the distribution of the area about the axis of rotation. So this was the clarification about which axis during the bending the moment is going to take place. That the bending axis we are able to identify depending upon the moment of inertia value. So the next topic we are going to consider is the failure criterion for the studs. Most of the components in the machine design, as we all of are aware, they are being designed for the yield stress, that is under the given loading. When the value of the induced stresses they reach the value of the yield stress, then the material is said to be failed. However, the ultimate tensile strength of the material is much higher than the yield value, and even the failure value of the component when it actually fractured, that is the fracture value of the stress is even higher than the yield value. Even then, why we used to choose the yielding as the criteria of the failure for most of the component? This is because uh, uh, yield is the point beyond which the deformation of the material is going to be considered as the plastic deformation. And the plastic deformation means there is going to be the permanent deformation of the material, and the permanent deformation results in the induction of the residual stresses within the material. And the residual stresses which induced because of the your permanent deformation, they are going to be there within the material in the form of the residual stresses, and the residual stresses they are going to reduce the subsequent limiting value of the stress to which the component is to be subjected. For example, if a component is being designed to carry a stress of say 100 megapascal, and if it is being loaded beyond the yield point, and because of the permanent deformation, say its residual stresses which is induced within the material is say 20 megapascal. So in the subsequent cycle the limiting value of the stress is going to be 80 megapascal, because the component is designed for the maximum stress, total stress is 100 megapascal. So this is the reason why your component is being designed for the yield value, because the yielding actually reduces the bearing capacity of the component when during the loading. So in case of your columns, the failure criterion is not the yielding, actually it is the instability condition to which your component is being reached when the load is being applied, and that instability conditions resembles that your when the load reach that value, the your component is going to be in an unstable condition, and that subsequently is going to increase the your stress value, and the stress is going to be continuously increased, and it will cross the yield stress and the ultimate tensile stress and even the fracture stress. So the point what I want to say is why the instability is being considered as the criteria for the failure of the columns, as the value of the load corresponding to this instability condition is comparatively lower than the yield stress, means the load is being applied that has transformed the given stable condition of the loading of the component into unstable situation. However, corresponding to that unstable situation, the value of the load is such that the yield point has not reached. So the material is not failed because of the yielding, but it has reached a stage where that it has crossed a point above beyond which it's the induced stress is going to be continuously increased, and it will cross the yield value, it will cross the ultimate tensile stress, and even it may reach the value of the fracture of the material. And such a process is known as the crumbling or the buckling of the column. More specifically, actually, the crumbling and the buckling are the intermediate states which the through which it passes actually. So in order to better understand this instability of columns, so we will consider the associated equilibrium conditions, that is stable equilibrium, and another is neutral equilibrium, spelling is actually NE, and third one is unstable equilibrium. So in order to better understand it, we will take an example of a sphere and the confining say the surface. Say for the stable equilibrium, if the confining surface which is going to carry the sphere is like this, and sphere is at rest at this point, say A, and if certain disturbance is being applied to this sphere, it is going to roll to and fro, and say it has reached, depending upon the amplitude of the disturbance that is being applied, it may have reached the state A1, and over here the state say A1 A1 dash, and this is the state A1. So the amplitude is going to be the same, and it is going to move to and fro until it is going to reach the final state is going to be the same state. When the disturbance is going to be reduced, the amplitude is going to be reduced, and subsequently it is going to regain its original equilibrium state, that is the state A. So such a equilibrium is known as a stable equilibrium, that whenever the disturbance is going to be removed, it is going to regain its original equilibrium state, and such is an example of your equilibrium, stable equilibrium. Another is neutral equilibrium. Neutral equilibrium is when the confining, for example, when the confining surface for the sphere is a horizontal, and whenever a disturbance is going to be provided over here, so depending upon the amplitude of the disturbance, it is going to acquire the new equilibrium state. Say if it is A1, then A2 is going to be the new equilibrium state. So such a situation is known as a neutral equilibrium, that is depending upon the amount of the disturbance, it is going to acquire the new equilibrium state. It is never going to regain its original equilibrium state if other than if your disturbance is provided in the opposite direction of the same magnitude. So such a situation is known as your neutral equilibrium, and unstable equilibrium is when the confining surface is inverted in comparison to the first example and the sphere is resting on this point. Any disturbance in any direction is going to push the sphere in a direction that it is going to be in an unstable equilibrium. That is, the sphere is going to fall and it is never going to attain the equilibrium state later on. So such a situation is being avoided in the loading of the column. Such a situation is undesirable because actually this leads to the situation when your component is ultimately is going to fail. So that was the situation I was talking about, that when a component is being loaded, it is going to transform the loading situation into the unstable situation, and this unstable, the load corresponding to this unstable situation has not reached the yield value yet. That is, the component is not being failed because of the yielding, but it has transformed the stable situation into the unstable one, and the stress is going to be increased continuously, and then it is going to cross actually the yield value and the ultimate tensile stress and even the fracture value. So let us take an example to understand it better. So say we are having a column, and say one end of the column is say free. Say this end is free, and if the load is being applied over here, and if a small disturbance is being provided here, small disturbance, say FD is being provided here, this is the load, this is going to be the same reaction. So in case of your stable equilibrium, because of this disturbance, it is going to say deform to this new state because of the disturbance, and when the disturbance is going to be removed, so this is the new position of that. So when the disturbance is going to say remove, it is going to regain its original state. That is, if it is the position A1, this is A2, then it is on the removal of the disturbance, A2 is going to acquire the initial position A1. So this is the value of the load. That is, the load value is such that it is going to deform the component, or it may deform because of the external disturbance, and due to the deformation it may have acquired the new equilibrium state A2. But when your load is going, this disturbance is going to be removed, it is going to regain its original position. Such a your equilibrium condition is known as a stable equilibrium condition. However, in the another case, neutral equilibrium is when the disturbance is being applied, it is going to acquire the new state A2. This is going to acquire the new state A2. So A2 is going to be the final equilibrium state even when this your FD is being removed. That is on the removal of the disturbing force, the equilibrium state is going to be A2. That is, the value of the load is such that it has reached the neutral equilibrium state. Obviously, the value of the loads in first case, where we are talking about the stable equilibrium, say load is P1, and for the another case, say load is P1, for the another case load is P2, and for the third case the load is P3. So the relative magnitudes of the load is going to be such that P1 is less than P2 is less than P3. So P3 is going to be the maximum load, which is going to result the stable condition of your column into the unstable one, and I have told what happens in the unstable equilibrium condition. So in case of unstable equilibrium condition, when the component is being loaded, it is going to reach the number of intermediate states. Say it has been reached the A2, then it might have reached A3 and here the yielding value might have been crossed, or it may have crumbled, or later on it may break down, or the fracture value has been reached. So these are the conditions which are subjective, which are being considered when the load P is say P3, and where P3 is the maximum load relative to the previous loading conditions, and such a situation is called as unstable equilibrium condition. So what is the point over here, that the stress in case of unstable equilibrium condition reaches the yield value, but initially the when we talk about the load even the combined your load, that is the indirect effect of the direct load, that is the bending moment. So combined stresses initially the combined stresses, they are not enough, that is the yield point has not been reached, but it has reached the unstable condition, which is subsequently is going to increase the bending, and hence the stresses are going to continuously increase, and they may cross the your yield stress, ultimate tensile stress, even reach the fracture stress, and this will result in the crumbling of the component. So in the failure criteria for the struts actually is the load corresponding to the neutral equilibrium condition, because stable equilibrium condition reflect any load which is lower than the neutral load, and whenever the load is being removed, or the disturbance is being removed, the your component is going to regain its equilibrium state more safe. But the limiting value of the load is being identified by the equilibrium condition, and that equilibrium condition is the neutral equilibrium condition, that is when it has reached a value, even when the disturbance has been removed, it is going to acquire the new equilibrium state, and such a situation is highly undesirable. That unstable situation has to be avoided, and that's why the components are basically designed to acquire these two equilibrium states, and the limiting value of the equilibrium state is going to be given by the neutral equilibrium state and the load corresponding to the neutral equilibrium state. Moreover, we are going to consider the fundamental mode of the failure later on, when we are going to consider the different types of your columns. Another is prerequisites for a better understanding of the topic, and those prerequisites which required refreshment over here, they are simple banding equation, and another important thing that is required to be refreshed over here, that is the relationship between uh, slope, we should start from the deflection. Deflection y, then slope, say denoted by I, and then bending moment, which is being denoted by M, and then the shear forces, which are represented by Q, and then load intensity, which is represented by small w. So these are the some important topic that you have been gone through in your previous the class on the strength of material. So simple bending equation is M upon I is equal to sigma B upon Y is equal to E upon R. So M is the resisting bending moment that is being induced in the component because of the external loading, that may be point loads, or that may be directly because of the moment or the couple that is being applied around the length of the beam. I is the second moment of the area. So we usually call it the moment of the inertia, but this is not the moment of the inertia or the area moment of the inertia. Sometimes we used to call it. It is not the moment of the inertia. Basically, it is the second moment of the area, and I have already told what is the physical significance of the your second moment of the area. So this is your second moment of area, which is in some books is being referred as the your area moment of the inertia. So another thing is sigma p is the stress, bending stress corresponding to the value of y, that is the distance of the fiber from the neutral axis. So this is the value of this your bending stress at the fiber which is located at y from the neutral axis, and is the modulus of elasticity, and R is the radius of curvature of the beam when it is subjected to the simple bending. Another you see the advantage of considering the failure at the yield point is that we are able to apply the simple theories of the elasticity. That is say that's why we are using here E, Young's modulus of elasticity. So within the proportional limit is A remains the constant. So this is the bending equation we need to remember, and moreover we need to consider this pair because this is going to be used later on. So from this pair we know that the bending moment, which is equal to EI upon R. So this is the equation 1 which we are going to consider later on. So this is the equation which is based upon the simple bending. So another thing which we need to consider, इसको मैं यहाँ लिख देता हूँ, m is equal to EI upon R. This is equation 1. So in order to find out the relationship between the deflection slope and the bending moment, so let us try to find out the slope first. And say consider a beam. Coordinate system we have chosen, say left hand side coordinate, and say this is your x-axis and this one is your y-axis and this is the origin, and within this we have chosen the length of a beam AB, and say it is on loading it is being deformed. I'm not showing the load. On loading it is being deformed like this. So at a point, say this is the point C, we are interested in finding out the slope over here. Then we know that the slope is nothing but the angle made by the common tangent at this point or the tangent at this point, and this tangent is represented by the slope I, where I is basically the angle. And if we draw the common normal at this point or the normal at this point, so we know that the normal at the tangency, at the point of the tangency, is going to pass through the center. Say this is the center for the instant radius of curvature of this deformed beam at C is, so this is your R. Now if I draw a line which is perpendicular to the horizontal axis, x-axis, then this is perpendicular to this line because this line is parallel to your x-axis. Another line, the line joining the center, which represents the radius, is perpendicular to this line. So this angle is going to be the I, because this angle is subtended by the angle which are perpendicular to the line which constitute I. I is the angle between these lines, and angle between their perpendicular is also going to be I. So slope is basically defined as the tangent of the angle subtended over here, and this tangent is perpendicular upon the base. So we take a differential distance. So we choose a differential distance that when we move in the x direction, we move differential amount in the y direction also. This is dy and say this is your dx. So अगर थोड़ा सा बड़ा करके मैं इसको बनाऊं, so this is I, and this is dy, and this one is dx, and this is your say ds. ds is the arc length actually. This is your ds, and then the arc length and the straight line is going to be same, almost same, because we are considering the differential amount. Then this arc length, say this the angle subtended by this your differential, यहाँ तक ले लेते हैं इसको, differential quantities dy and dx. So this angle is going to be say di. Then we know that your ds, where ds is the arc length basically, then arc length is basically r into theta. So r is capital R and theta is di. So arc length is r into di. And when the angle is this angle is very small. In case of the beams, the angle of the deformation, that is the slope is going to, usually it is very small. So when, and moreover we are considering the differential amounts, so in that case ds is almost equivalent to the value of dx, that is the hypotenuse, and the base values are going to be almost the same, because the angle is very small, that is the value of dy is very small. So from here we conclude that dx is equal to r into di, and from here we are able to find out a relation, that is di upon dx is equal to 1 by r. So this is what I is. Actually I is, we will try to find out tangent of this angle is dy upon dx, and because the angle is very small, then we know that the tangent of the angle approaches the value of the angle when the angle is very small. So we ultimately we say that I, which is the slope, is equal to dy upon dx, where y is the deflection of the beam, where y is the deflection of the beam at any distance x. So I slope, so we have identified that the slope I is equal to dy upon dx, where y is the deflection of the beam or column. Then from this relationship we are able to find out the rate of change of slope, that is dy upon dx is equal to 1 by r, and when we substitute the value of I over here, then it is the second derivative of y, dx square is equal to 1 by r. So this is the another relationship, and when we compare it, compare this value over here, say this is equation 2, from equation 1 and 2, what we identify, that the value of 1 by r is equal to dy square divided by dx square. So the value of m, that is the bending moment, is going to be equal to ei into d square y upon dx square. Say this is equation 3. So we have identified that if we know the slope deflection, then we are able, then the rate of change of this your deflection give us the value of the slope, and if we are able to find out the value of the slope, then the second derivative multiplied by the constant ei. E is the value which corresponds to the type of the material, and I is the value which corresponds to the type of the cross section we are talking about. So for a given beam or a column, ei is a constant, and the rate of change of slope, when it is multiplied by the constant ei, it is going to give us the value of the bending moment at that point. So in order to find out the relationship between bending moment, shear force and load intensity, we need to consider another example. So let us consider a simply supported beam which is loaded uniformly varying load. Say this is your uniformly varying load, UVL, and we are considering only a small portion of this beam, differential portion of this beam, and your axis coordinate system we are choosing is this x, and this one is going to y, and this is going to the origin. So origin is going to be say over here. So no need to take the origin actually in this case, because we are only considering the differential amount of your uh, the beam, and that differential, the length is going to be x because of the system we have choose, coordinate system we have choose. So this distance is going to be your dx. And since we are dealing with only the elementary thickness of the, or elementary length of the beam, so this load over here, the actual load on the beam is UVL, uniformly varying load, but over a small portion it can be considered uniformly distributed load. So we are going to consider, I am going to draw the exaggerated view of this differential length of the beam, and under the exaggerated view, say this is the length dx, and it is subjected to the uniformly distributed load. Now this is your uniformly distributed load, UDL. This is going to be your UDL now. And we know that because I have taken the example of your simply supported beam, then we know from our previous knowledge that the bending moment diagram for the simply supported beam is always positive. So the bending moment, if it is positive, then the bending moment is going to be your such that at the both ends, the bending moment, because of the portion, because we are going to slice it, and the portion is going to apply a bending moment on this component such that the bending moment over here is going to be positive, and the effect of the bending moment has to produce the sagging effect. Sagging is going to be produced when the bending moment at both the cross section, at this end and this end, is going to be, at this end it is anti-clockwise and at this end it is clockwise. So these are the effect of the moments when we are going to separate this portion, left hand side portion and the right hand side portion, and I have considered them the sense of the bending moment this way because I know that the bending moment is going to be positive, that the effect is going to be the sagging, concavity at the top. So if the bending moment at this end say is m, then the bending moment over here, when the differential your distance we have moved along the your beam, this is going to be m plus dm. That is rate of change of m with respect to x multiplied by x is going to be x dx. Dx is going to be cancelled out, and then the differential your the bending moment when we moved the distance dx. And similarly, we are going to consider arbitrary shape. The shear stress, we can choose in the upward direction, we can choose in the downward direction. I am choosing here the shear stress in the downward direction. Say this is your Q, and obviously on the other side the shear, the sense, because I am choosing it in the downward direction, in the other side it is going to be upward direction, because we are considering the section of the length dx, which is very small, and we know that across a cross section shear stresses always exist in pair of equal and opposite forces. So I am considering the length, there is a length dx, but it can be considered so small that it can be considered a cross section where the shear stresses are of equal value and they are equal and opposite. So that's why I am choosing the sense. If we have chosen it in the downward direction, this has to be in the upward direction, and the value is going to be q plus delta q. So delta q is very small, and again this is the initial value of the q plus rate of change of q with respect to x multiplied by dx. It is going to be cancelled, and we are going to add delta q only. So the sign is going to be plus minus, that we are going to incorporate. We don't know whether the change in the bending moment when we are moving towards x direction is positive, or this change is positive or negative. We are going to identify it for the equilibrium condition. Now consider the equilibrium condition. For the equilibrium of the beam, algebraic sum of the forces must be equal to 0. Algebraic sum of the moments must be equal to 0. Say we are considering the equation 1 first, and this is say equation 2. say this is the equation, because we have already choose 1 2. So algebraic sum of the forces must be equal to 0, and we are there must be sign convention, and the sign convention is for the shear forces. Sign convention for the shear forces across a cross section, clockwise shear is going to clockwise shear. So this is going to be positive, this is going to be positive. That is, when we are dealing with the forces in the left of the section, then the upward forces are going to be positive, and when we are dealing with the right of the section, then the downward forces are going to be positive. Similarly, sign convention for bending moment is going to be, as I have already told, sagging and the hogging. So across a cross section, when we are dealing with the right of the forces, if the force is going to induce the anti-clockwise movement, then it is going to be considered as positive. And if we are talking about the left, if the force is going to induce the clockwise movement, then it is going to be positive. Ultimately, when the concavity at the top is going to be induced, then such a situation is known as sagging. And in case of sagging, the bending moments are considered as positive. These are the sign conventions which are consistent for the your say, they are algebraically consistent. That is, the positive value of the slope is always going to be consistent with the mathematically positive sign. So these are the sign conventions we are going to consider, and considering these sign conventions, we are considering the equation 1 first, that is algebraic sum of the forces must be equal to 0. Since we are dealing with the downward force, we are moving from left to right. So as we have started from the length, the initial length, we have encountered a force Q acting in the downward direction. So this is going to be minus Q, and then when we move, we have find out the UDL of the length dx, and say the intensity of this load is W per meter, or per unit length, per unit, better to call it per unit length, and whatever is the unit of the length. So this is going to be equal to, because it is also acting in the downward direction, then the sign is going to be minus W into dx, acting in the downward direction, total load because of the UDM. Then we are going to reach the another value which is acting in the upward direction. This is going to be Q plus minus, I don't know, I know the value of the Q is going to be positive, but the differential change in the Q I don't know. So this should be equal to 0. So we have identified over here that the minus into dx, because the sign is minus, then this sign has to be positive. So this we have identified what should be the value of the change in delta Q, which the change in the delta Q has to be positive, and this should be equal to 0. So we have identified that the W must be equal to dq upon dx. That is the rate of change of Q, shear force, where Q is the shear force. So rate of change of the shear force with respect to the length is will give us the value of the load intensity. Or in other words, if we are having the shear force diagram, then the slope of the shear force diagram, dq upon dx, what is dq upon dx? This is the slope of the shear force diagram, that will give us the value of the load intensity, W, small w. And similarly, if we are considering the equilibrium, if we are considering the equilibrium of the second equilibrium condition, that is the algebraic sum of the moments, then we see that the moment we are moving from left to right, immediately when we start, we have identified that the moment is acting and which is clockwise. So this is your positive. So the sign is going to be positive, and the moment is, the magnitude of the moment is m. Now we know that the UDL, the total UDL was W into dx, and this UDL is because of the symmetry, it is going to be at the center of this length. So this is W into dx, which is going to be at the center, and this distance is going to be equal to dx by 2. So the moment because of this UDL, and before the UDL we have identified that there is a force also whose moment about this point, starting point was 0, but since we have moved further, so we have identified this is going to produce a moment, and say we are considering the moments about say this end point, say this is the point, say this one is say A, this one is B. So very important thing is we need to specify the moments. So consider the moments about point B. So we are considering the moments about the point B. So this is going to induce the anti-clockwise moment, and we are dealing with the forces at the left of the section. Then the anti-clockwise moments, I know that it is going to produce the hogging effect. So sign is going to be negative. So this is going to be q into dx, negative sign. Then we are going to have again the negative sign, because this force we as when we moved over here, then we are dealing with the force at the left of the section, and it is going to induce the anti-clockwise moment to the left of the section, and this clockwise moments are positive to the left of the section. Then the sign is going to be again negative, and this is going to be w into dx is the force into the distance, that is dx by 2. This is the moment. And then we know that the moment because of this force about this point is going to be 0, but at the end we have identified there is a couple which is acting over here, and the value is when we reached over here, again we are considering the loads to the left of the section, then this load is actually is going to be considered as we move just over here. We have identified there is the load, that is the bending moment, which is acting in the anti-clockwise direction, and I am considering anti-clockwise to the left of the section, and anti-clockwise to the left of the section is again negative, minus m plus dm is equal to 0. So we have identified this is going to be cancel out, and this is has to be ignored, that is this is going to be comparatively, because we are considering the product of the two smaller quantities, differential quantity dx square. So this is going in comparison to the other quantities, this quantity is going to be smaller and it can be neglected. So again I am using the sign minus plus minus sign. I don't know what will be the value, but from the interpretation we are able to identify. So this is going to be minus q into dx, and since it is minus, then this should be equal to the plus, dm should be equal to 0. So from here we have identified that the q is equal to dm upon dx, that is the rate of change of the bending moment with respect to the length of the beam. X is will give us the value of the shear force. So the shear force is nothing but this is the slope of the bending moment diagram, as the load intensity was your slope of the your shear force diagram. So what we conclude now from all this topic, we conclude that the deflection is given by y. At any x, if the deflection is known, then we are able to find out the slope, which will be equal to dy upon dx, which will be given by dy upon dx. Then the bending moment, which is denoted by m, will be given by ei into d square y upon dx square. If we know the slope, then the rate of change of slope, if we are able to identify, then we are able to identify the bending moment. Then the shear force q is equal to will be given by your ei, because you see that what is the shear force from this equation. Say this equation is say 4. From the equation 4 we know that q is dm upon dx, and we have already identified the m. So dm upon dx from this value is going to be ei into d cube y upon dx square. So what we are doing, we are substituting the value of the m from here in the equation 4, and then we are going to have this equation. This is going to be the q, dx cube. And similarly we know the load intensity small w is going to be given by this is given by the rate of change of shear force with respect to s. We have identified the shear force, and say this is, if this is the equation 5, say if this is the equation 5, then substitute the value of the shear force over here. then it is going to be the ai into d raised to the power 4 into dx raised to the power 4. So these values give us the magnitude of the various quantities, and the sign convention which we are going to follow is this, which are consistent algebraically and mathematically they are consistent. That is, the positive slopes are going to have the positive signs. So another important thing which is important here to identify is actually the diagram has to be drawn, and so variation is also important, how it is being varied. So if I'm going to draw this, sign convention is also important, and sign convention actually depend upon the coordinate system we are choosing. So we are choosing the left hand coordinate system, and say the horizontal direction gives the value of the x, and another direction give us the value of the slope. So for this coordinate system, if is we are choosing a beam, and say it is being deflected this way, and say this is your and condition that depend, and conditions actually depends. So say at any x, say at any x, this is the direction y, and this is the direction your x. So this at any x, the value of the slope is y. So slope is, in this case, the slope is negative. So and this was for the slope. Sorry, this was for the deflection diagram. And second, if we know the deflection diagram, then we are able to draw the your slope diagram also. Slope diagram also, deflection y, then the diagram for the slope. So if we are having the diagram for the slope, then sorry, the deflection, then the for the slope, that is I, which is equal to dy upon dx. Positive sign is going to be in the upward direction, and this is going to be your x direction. And from here, because we are dealing with the negative quantities of the y, you will see that the final value, the dy upon dx, at this point dy upon dx, that is when we are moving a differential distance in the x direction, then we have identified the differential change in the value of the y, and both the values of the y are negative. So dy, we know that dy upon dx, for the differential values, we know that this is going to be the final value of y minus the initial value of y divided by final value of x minus the initial value of x. So x quantities are positive, and we know that the final value of x is greater than the initial value of x. So this is going to be the positive. Your denominator is going to be positive, and numerator over here, because both the quantities are negative, so minus y final minus initial value of the final. So and we know that the final value between the two final values in this case is greater than yf. Also know that yf is greater than yi. So the sign is going to be negative. If the initial value would have been greater, जब हम यहाँ से right में move कर जाएंगे, then you will identify the final value of the y in comparison to the initial value is smaller. So because the initial value is going to be the high, and the way the formula is going to be incorporated, then the sign associated with the initial value is going to be the positive. And since the initial value in this case for the later half is going to be greater than the your final value, then the sign is going to be positive. So as already you see that at this distance the slope is 0, so we are going to move this is the going to the point of contrafracture for the slope, where it is going to change the sign, and the maximum slope is going to be at this point negative, and the slope is going to decrease later on, and finally we are going to have the positive slope at the end. So this is your the slope diagram. So maximum slope is going to be at the end. So again, you see in this case at this end where x is equal to 0, at x equal to 0, dy y is also equal to 0, and dy upon dx is not equal to 0. But if the end was fixed, if the end was fixed, then dy upon dx is equal to 0. If the ends are fixed, if these ends were the fixed, अगर ये फिक्स होते then the dy upon dx must be equal to 0. Then dy upon dx would have been equal to 0 for fixed end. For fixed end, dy upon dx should have been equal to 0. Why it is so? You see that we are y is 0. Definitely the y is 0, and we are talking about dy upon dx at x equal to 0. Dy upon dx definitely it has been specified at a point, but it take into consideration the differential changes when we move from that point in the positive direction of the x. So what is the change in the direction of y? Differential changes are being considered, however it is being considered at a point. So when the end are pinned, so when the end are pinned, we know that the slope at the end is going to be there. There will be the value of the slope. You will see if the value of the slope, if it is not parallel to the x-axis, then your slope has a certain angle, and obviously the slope is negative in this case. So that's why we are moving from the negative direction of the slope towards the positive direction of the slope, because here the sign is positive. So the point what I want to say, when your ends are fixed, then the dy upon dx is equal to 0 when the ends are fixed. Why it is so? Because the ends are fixed, then the differential moment, actually this end of the your beam or the column is going to be perpendicular to it, and later on it is going to be deflected. So this is going to be the situation, but this is the magnified view. अगर आप इसको actual view में देखेंगे, then it is going to be seen, this perpendicular is going to be seen very very small, and it is going to be equivalent to this. So this is going to create a confusion, that you will able to identify that there is a slope which is not 0, but actually the slope is 0, because of the fix, because they are fixed at the end, and for a differential distance the length is going to be, they are going to be perpendicular to it. That is the y is going to be the constant. That is the final and the initial values are going to be the same. So if the final and the initial values are going to be the same, then the dy upon dx at this end, when x equal to 0 or x equal to L, they are going to be equal to 0. So it is very very important for which condition we need to identify the slope. So when the ends are the pin or the simply supported, even in case of a simply supported, because it is not going to provide the resisting moment at the end, so there will be a slope which is not going to be 0. And in case of a fixed, when the ends are fixed, then the slope is going to be 0 at x equal to 0, when y is equal to 0, and as well at x equal, if the other end is also going to be fixed, then the slope at that end is also going to be 0. Now the another thing is, we need to identify the variation of your bending moment. So bending moment m, and for this, if we are, you need only the your deflection diagram. From the deflection diagram we are able to draw all the other subsequent diagram. So this is the positive direction of x, this is the positive direction of the bending moment, which is equal to ei into d square y upon dx square. And since the slope, you see that bending moment is directly proportional to the rate of change of the slope. That is, rate of change of slope at this point is going to be, that is the slope of the slope diagram is going to give us the bending moment, because this is what this is equal to di upon dy. That is the slope, that is the slope of the slope diagram. The slope of the slope diagram at this point is going to be 0, because this is the maximum point, and at this point the slope is 0. So this is the point where it is going to be 0, and later on you will see, we need to identify how it is going to change. You will see that the final value of y is smaller than the initial value of y. So when we talk about the final y minus initial y, which is greater, so we are going to have a situation minus final y plus initial y, and because initial y is greater than, it is greater than the final y, then the sign is going to be the positive. So we are moving from positive sign.
and we know that the bending moment is maximum at the center if it is a simple case, and and this is going to be the maximum over the point where the real slope is 0, and this is the case. So you see that where we are considering the bending moment maximum. So bending moment is directly proportional to the rate of change of slope, and the maximum value of the bending moment is where di upon dy is equal to 0. So this is what we used to consider when that is the maximum value. We used to find out the maximum value at a point when the rate of change of the two quantities on which we are say of the slope diagram. Along one direction we are considering the slope, and then another direction we are considering the independent variable x. Then the rate of change of slope with respect to y is equal to 0. So that's why we used to consider the differentiation of an equation in order to find out the optimum value of the dependent variable for any value of the independent variable. So this is your bending moment diagram, and similarly we are able to draw the subsequent diagram by following the same theory. So you see that the your slope of from here shear force is rate of change of the bending moment. So shear force is basically from here it is dm upon dx. So bending moment diagram we have drawn, then its slope. Then its slope is going to give us the shear force diagram. So initial value of the slope is going to be the positive, and इसका बिल्कुल inverse mirror image बनेगा next diagram. And then finally we are going to have the similar diagram for the your loading for the intensity of the loading. So these are the prerequisites which I consider important for the better understanding of the topic, that is the columns and the studs. So what we are trying to find out in the columns and the studs, we are trying to find out the limiting value of the load that results in the unstable subsequent loading may result in the unstable condition, and stability is, that's why it's considered as the criteria of the failure for such components. So actually we are going to find out the value corresponding to the neutral equilibrium as we have discussed before. So thank you very much. In the next session we are going to deal with the theories through which we are able to find out the limiting value of the load for the stable equilibrium of the column.